Good morning. So glad to be here. I am sitting here in Chicago, where it is a beautiful sunny day. I hope it's lovely wherever you are. Um, while I am sharing my screen, I can't see the broadcast. So, Juan, can you just confirm everything looks good and you can hear me?
Yep, everything looks good.
Great, great. Well, I'm really excited to be here. I've known Kyle and AMO opportunities for a long time and really excited about this work. Today, we're going to dive into residency applications, specifically some advice about writing your personal statement and interview prep. Um, Today, I'm going to start with telling you a little bit about Upwardly Global, the organization where I work, and then a little bit about myself. And then, as I said, we're going to really dive into some tips about the personal statement, which is a really, really important part of a residency application. Something that, may not be a familiar thing for an IMG to think about what to put in this one page that's going to make them stand out and be chosen for an interview. And then we will also take some time to share some tips about residency interviews. So, Upwardly Global is a nonprofit. It's an NGO. It's based in the United States. We were founded in the year 2000, and we come out of the refugee resettlement movement. So, the woman who started us was working with resettlement of refugees, um, and visited a town in upstate New York and was brought to a chicken processing plant where she met what the plant manager said were his best employees. And they were one was a Serbian doctor, and one was a Russian engineer. And she realized this might not be the best outcome for the United States or for these families, that they were working in a chicken processing plant. So she created an organization to help folks who come to the US as immigrants, refugees, asylees, um, to be able to work in the fields that they were trained in and had experience in, and support their families, and also contribute to the US economy. As we know, there are tremendous needs in various areas of employment in the US. And specifically today, we're going to drill in a little bit more about how to help IMGs work as doctors in the US. So, our mission is to eliminate employment barriers for immigrant and refugee professionals and to advance the inclusion of their skills into the US economy. As I said, we are what we call a 501(c)(3) or a nonprofit in the US, which means we're funded through private donations, foundations, we get some government money, and we have a significant number of corporate donors who support our work. We're the first and longest serving nonprofit in this space. Our services are 100% free to the refugee immigrant job seekers who access them. And we also have a lot of effort to get materials out to people who don't qualify for our program. So, even if you're not currently in the US, I encourage you to look at our website because there are a lot of free resources. We have a library of training and such that you can access. We have offices on the ground in Chicago, where I'm sitting, in New York, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. Um, and we serve people in a bunch of other states, which you'll see on this slide on the right. So, our program involves providing job coaching and skilling. We have an online soft skills training, as I mentioned, for folks in the program, but there's a significant amount of that training that you can access off our website, even if you don't qualify. If you're part of our program, we provide coaching and mentoring. I'm one of the job coaches, so this is the work that I do. We also have opportunities via our many employer partners. So, as I mentioned, to be part of the program, you need to have a green card or a humanitarian visa, work authorized, be in the United States. have a bachelor's degree or equivalent, have been in the US for 7 years or less, speak intermediate to advanced English, and reside in California, Washington State, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, Illinois, Indiana, Georgia, Texas, Ohio, Minnesota, Tennessee, or Wisconsin. So, for those who might qualify, we'd love to have you join the program. But today, I'm really happy to share with people all around the world. So, I have a background in both career coaching and counseling and public policy. So, when I joined Upwardly Global about 9 years ago, it was a really natural draw to start working in the healthcare space. I've individually supported hundreds of job seekers. I just recently placed my 400th job seeker in healthcare, law, education, and nonprofit fields. So, in many fields, but I am also the Upwardly Global lead of our healthcare team. And we're really spending a lot of time and energy figuring out how to support healthcare professionals, about 40, more than 40% of whom are IMGs. So we know the challenges that doctors face when they come to the U.S. are really, really vast, and we really want to be able to help um, both in applying and being successful matching for residency, also looking at alternative career pathways, be that clinical research or medical administration, public health. So we look at those. And then our organization is also involved in some advocacy um, as part of a national network to really look at our laws and figure out if there could be alternative pathways towards licensing for IMGs. So we're really, very committed in this space. And this, as I said, is the work I've been doing for a long time now. So, getting to residency. So, I'm assuming if you're in this session, you've passed the USMLEs or you're about to, and you're thinking about the ARIS application and the final steps in getting to residency. So, the ARIS application has a number of pieces. Obviously, your ECFMG certification, your USMLE scores, those pieces, and then also a CV, which they provide a format, a form that you fill out with all your experience, a personal statement, and some supporting documents. So today, I want to, like I said earlier, really drill in more about those personal statements, and then also talk a bit about interviews and the interviewing process and how to prepare yourself. I think from what I know of this process, both the personal statement and the interviews are very culturally oriented. For those of us who grew up in the U.S., we write personal statements from a young age when we start applying to colleges and other life experiences and get some background in this. In the United States, interviewing is incredibly important. I know in some countries, once you pass certain tests and get an education, you're assumed to be qualified and you find opportunities, and the interviewing is a much less essential piece of the process. So at Upglow and in my work, we really spend a lot of time thinking about this cultural piece and how to help people be successful. So personal statements. So like I said, this might be something new for you. Um, what does it mean to tell a personal statement? You have this opportunity in your CV to share information about your work and your volunteering and your schooling and your languages and even your hobbies. So what are they looking for? What are programs looking for in a personal statement? They're looking to get a sense of you. And as I said, this is really a cultural thing in the US, especially for a residency application. They're looking they want to know who you are and if you're going to be a good fit. So a lot of in the US is looking for fit. And for an IMG, depending on where you are in your process, you may have practiced medicine already, you maybe have some leadership roles. So they want to know that you will be a team player and learner. Um, really, really important aspects of this process. So we're looking to make the personal statement about a page, and it's really easy to include a lot of flowery language and a lot of hyperbole, I might say, or just messages about how you're so excited and grateful and qualified, and a lot of high level language that isn't personal and isn't going to paint a picture. So I really, when I'm coaching folks to write this statement, I want to encourage them to paint a picture, to use words, and it doesn't have to be a lot of words, but some words that shows what's unique about you, what makes you someone they want to be around. Because, you know, when push comes to shove, they're looking at thousands and thousands of residency applications. They look at your scores and your background, but when they get to the point of reading this personal statement, they've already deemed you to be somewhat qualified, and now they want to know, are you someone they want to bring on their team? So, thinking about what makes you unique, um, and that's can be hard because you're in a community. I mean, there are thousands of you here now who are coming from all over the world who want to be part of the US healthcare system, and that can feel challenging to think about what makes you unique. What's your story? And I'll continue with some questions that might get at it, but really you want to show that you're mature, that you're thoughtful, that you're enthusiastic, that you're, as I said, teamwork is hugely important. So if you can share a little example, a vignette of when you were part of a team and you solved a problem, or you cared for a patient, that can be really, really meaningful. As I said, these are not long statements. Residency programs are getting thousands and thousands of applications, so you really want to figure out a way to do this um, in one page. Um, so the structure, um, you want to use a introduction paragraph that's got a hook. Um, a lot of folks want to, start with, especially folks from less developed countries, to tell a story of their first encounter with healthcare or doctors, maybe a family member's illness. That's okay, but you don't want that to be that should just be a little hook, a little taste. Really the main message is what makes you a good doctor. You want to mention something about the specialty you're choosing, the body paragraphs, relevant personal experience, information, qualities. If you have US clinical experience, it's a great thing to reference here. Um, you want the whole thing to hold together. So, think about what your theme is, and then, you can kind of use that, growing up, I love to cook, I love to bring ingredients together and make something wonderful. It was that sort of interest that brought me to medicine to learn the way, everything holds together, a team in the hospital. And now I know, just like I know the ingredients to make a beautiful cake, I know a lot about how to care for people and provide excellent diagnosis and treatment. Okay, so that was a little corny, but sort of thinking about if you're going to have kind of a theme, something that will reflect well and not detract. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, if you had, growing up, you were a gymnast or did martial arts, you can reference that, but you want to make sure still that the emphasis is on your medical experience, what makes you a good doctor, um, and why a residency program would want to have you. So one of the ways, like I said, brainstorming is really important, and maybe to take some time, and make some lists. Why did you want to enter this specialty? Was there a moment or a trigger that you can talk about? Some people, as I say, talk about a family members or their own personal medical experiences, but which is fine. But once again, not to make that the emphasis. The emphasis of this statement, personal statement, is who you are as a medical professional, and you can talk a little bit about your goals, short term and long term. But once again, really not using the majority of the page to talk about the future, but really to emphasize where you've been and what you've done up to this point. Um, and then also some of your characteristics, if you're curious, if you're hardworking, um, if you're a good problem solver, if you've empathetic, all those sorts of things can be woven in. Um, it is better when you're talking about your characteristics to give an example than just to state it. So to say, I've always been very caring and empathetic, okay. But if you say, when I was working in a clinic in my hometown, um, and I met a patient who was um, struggling with cancer, and I really spent a lot of time with them, connecting with them, learning their stories and supporting them, then I see how you were empathetic. So it's better to be able to do that than to really focus only on a list of characteristics or a list of skills. So thinking about, and those examples don't have to be very long. It's really fine to take a page or two, a line or two, to say, I was known as someone who, who could work, who could do a very excellent hands-on examination, and often because I was sensitive, um, diagnose very complicated conditions. So just thinking about those little words that paint a picture of what you did and what you can do if you are invited to be part of this residency team. Um, you can also think about what has helped you grow as a person or a professional, struggles, things that have helped you, but don't focus on your struggle so much. But, you can say if you've been, practicing medicine during a natural disaster or or an, perhaps a pandemic, to talk a little bit how you contributed, what you learned, but once again, keeping it all somewhat brief. One really helpful way to brainstorm and think is just, to close your eyes and think about when you felt really proud of your own work. What were those moments that made you glow inside because you were doing what you felt you were born to do and doing it well, you know think about those moments and use that energy sort of to enhance your personal statement. And then think about once again what is distinguishing about you and what you can bring to the specialty in the program. Some other tips that you really want to think about, take some time on the personal statement. Don't rush through it. Don't do it the night before. Find a trusted friend or a colleague or advisor who can do a read through. You want it to be grammatically correct, spelling, it has to be your voice, but you want it to be as correctly written as possible. Do not forget to use spell check if you're using Microsoft Word or Google, and make sure it's set to the English setting, because if it's set to your native language, you won't catch mistakes. It's really great to use, as I say, spell check. Grammarly is a great resource. If you have a native English speaker in your community who's willing to do a read through, really, really spend some time on this. We know this is an important part of the application, and it's worth putting in that extra effort to make sure it's as good as it can be. So hopefully you get your application in, you upload everything. You've probably applied to hundreds of programs, and then you start hearing about interviews. It's very exciting. These are very important. Once again, I know in other cultures and the countries in the world, interviews are not so important. But in the US, we're all about finding that fit, finding people who are good communicators. So figure out how to practice together. I know one of the aspects of this conference is some networking time. If you do not have really trusted friends and colleagues to do practice, find some new people. There's tons of information about residency interviews on YouTube, so that's very valuable. But the most valuable thing is practicing and figuring out a space to do that. Once I was interviewing for a job and I sat with my husband and my best friend to do interview practice. There's nothing like doing interview practice with people who will tell you everything. It can be very daunting to do this. Another way you can do interview practice, as honest as your best friend and your spouse might be, yourself. So many of us, we're all on computers today. You can do some videotaping of yourself, turn on your camera and see how it goes, which can be very, very valuable. I'm going to say also, do not obsess about your accent or your English level. Trust that you are fine and trust that you can do it. If you get in your own head about it, about your language challenges, that won't help you. That'll just make you more nervous. If you're struggling with English, take classes. Like I said, find a language buddy online. I know there are matching programs, but when you get to the interview is not the moment to have that panic. So do everything you can moving into that space to be prepared, and then trust yourself. The United States is a country full of immigrants and folks from all over the world. Many, many of our professionals in all fields are internationally trained or grew up in other countries. And it's okay to have an accent. And there's not, that's not That's not what's going to hold you back. What might hold you back is being so stressed out about it that it makes you nervous in the interview. So take care of yourself and think this through. How will you be best able to prepare yourself? So, in addition to thinking about practice and language acquisition, and practice, just practice. I think speaking a foreign language is all about using it. But also, when you get to the interview point, you want to do some research on the program. Many programs will include an online open house or question session as part of the interview. It's really wonderful that they've moved this process online. It makes it more accessible for many people. You don't need to pay to travel, but do spend some time thinking about the program, where it's located, what their language on their website. Um, if you can find someone who's been at the hospital, who's been a resident in the program, find out what they say. Is the strengths of their program, what makes it unique. Anything you can say about the community. If you come from a very warm part of the world and you're interviewing for a residency in upstate New York or Minnesota, it's good to let them know you're excited to experience winter, or or you have some experience um, in harsh weather, because they want to know that you're a good fit. They want to know they're not going to have to take care of you. Um, so thinking about letting them know, you have a support system, be that your family, your friends, if you, like I said, if you know other people already in the program, that can be great. We talked a little bit about practicing interview questions, finding someone who can be an advisor to you, who can really, really give you very frank and honest feedback. That can be very helpful. Um, and then making sure you're comfortable with whatever the virtual meeting platform the interview is going to be held over. There are many of those out there. There are Teams meetings and Zoom and Google Meets and all sorts of platforms. Make sure you have a quiet space with strong Wi-Fi, a neutral background, all of those things. You don't want to distract from the interview. Programs know you have families, you have work, but really try to think about this time and space and how to um, make it um, peaceful for this. A lot of what I've spoken about is about finding that balance to let them know you're going to be a team player, you're going to contribute, you're going to be a learner, um, and that you're going to be really focused. A residency is not a job, it's really graduate medical education. So it's a learning period, although you're doing a tremendous amount of work. They want to get a sense that you have the personality and the resources to really be successful in that setting. So before I launch into some common interview questions, I also want to say a little bit about interview questions, a- a- and how you approach them. Um, you do not want to talk on and on like I am doing today, because it can be hard to focus. You want to try to turn an interview into a conversation. So starting at the highest level of a tell me about yourself, where you say, I trained as a doctor and I graduated in this year and worked in local clinics, and now I'm come to the US and I've rotated through a number of hospitals and really excited to start a residency in internal medicine. So not that short and brief, but a little bit, so they can say, "Oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more about your rotations, or tell me more about medical school." So the goal is not for you to talk and talk and talk, but to say enough to pique their interest, get a sense of you, and then hopefully it will become conversational. I know for residency interviews, some program directors just say, "Tell me what I need to know." Some are more directive and have more questions. Um, it's also really important to remember in an interview. You are also trying to get a sense of them. So once again, that more conversational, what's their attitude? What do they seem to be asking about? Are they focusing on research or patient care or language skills? So it's really important to try to get a read, though these interviews tend to be pretty short. They're obviously going to be online. So the more that you've thought through, like, what's the bottom line about yourself that you want to get across to them? I once did some practice with a doctor, and we were starting some interview practice, and I said, "Tell me about yourself." And he pulled his body into a ball, and he was very anxious. This was like his fifth time applying for residency. And he said, "You know about me. You read my application." And there was so much anxiety and just anxiety and defensiveness in that. I was like, "Whoa, we got to unpack that. We need to get to a place where, as nervous and anxious as you are, because as we know, there are very limited residency spots. This is very competitive. You have to come to this relaxed and positive, and don't get flustered if they haven't read your application or they don't remember things, because they're busy, they're interviewing a lot of people, and you want to bring your positivity and your warmth, however that's conveyed, into the interview. So some of the questions they might ask, as I said, "Tell me about yourself." That is not a deep dive 10-minute overview of your life. That's 1 to 2 minutes of sort of the highlights, what makes you a great doctor. They may ask why you decided to become a doctor, that they want to know about your background. And they want to know, I think, that you have a real interest and passion, not, "Well, I was a great student and my teachers told me to become a doctor, but I'm curious, I care about people." So really thinking through some of that. Um, like I said, this in the US, for a job interview, there's a very defined sort of questions they can ask. But because this is education, there's a lot more freedom to ask things that are more personal. Um, they may ask how your friends would describe you, um, how your supervisor might describe you, strengths and weaknesses. In the US, you should be prepared. It can be hard culturally to brag about yourself. That is one of the reasons that practice is so very important. You got to be comfortable saying, "I'm, a really um, good good at hands-on medical exams. I'm very comfortable connecting with patients. I'm good at solving problems, and I've been able to make really complicated diagnosis." So when they ask about strengths, you need to be prepared to tell them what's good about you in a way that feels comfortable, because I know in some cultures that is not the norm. Also, you need to be able to mention a weakness. You look for something that is not going to be a red flag or a big crisis. If you say my weakness is some days I sleep late and get to work late, they're not going to want you on their program. So it's they want you to know you're self-aware, but they also want to know that um that you're working to improve yourself. So you could say something like, talk about time management in a way that says, um, I'm very dedicated to doing great work, and so that means sometimes I end up staying late and working more than I should. So I've worked really hard with my supervisors to understand priorities and be more efficient. You sometimes people talk about public speaking, but then also saying, when I started my career or my education, I was very uncomfortable speaking in public, but I joined a group and practiced, and now I'm much more comfortable. So, once again, YouTube has lots of ideas about that weakness question. I think it's really unfair question. It sort of peeks at, like, have you prepared for this? But since you're all preparing, you're ahead of the ball. So, spend some time practicing and thinking about it. Like I said earlier, they may ask why you're interested in the program. So you want to talk about what you know about the program, the way they're teaching, or if there are research opportunities or opportunities to serve a diverse urban community, whatever they've highlighted on their website in your research, you found out those are things to bring up. What are you looking for in a program? Excuse me, also reference those things, but also use that as an opportunity to highlight, some things about you. I've been glad to have the opportunity to be involved in research, and looking for a program will have that opportunity, and was excited to see that, your residents do that, blah, blah, blah. They may ask a very blunt question: why should we choose you? So be prepared for that. Once again, similar to strengths, what makes you great, and being comfortable not spending time talking about deficiencies of other people, but what makes you a good choice. They may ask really crazy questions like, if you were an animal, what animal would you be? Um, I know there are lots of dolphins out there because they're good communicators and smart and um, strong animals. You may want to spend a little time thinking about that. Um, when they ask a question like that, if you were an animal, what animal would you be? If you were a sandwich, what sandwich would you be? They could ask anything like that. The answer is less important than how you come to. So, we were interviewing interns in my office once, and we were into that sandwich question. If you were a sandwich, what sandwich would you be? And one of the applicants said, I'd be an ice cream sandwich because I'm delicious and everyone likes me. Great answer. Years later, I still remember it. So don't obsess about all the possibilities of questions, but think about how you answer any question that could come your way. Because as prepared as you can be, you might not be prepared for some random question they come up with. How you can provide an answer that will help them see why you're a good fit for their program, why you're a good team player, why you have a lot to contribute. So they may also ask you about a deficiency on your record. We see you have a fail for step 1. We see you have a gap. So be prepared to talk about those. They're not game changers. One thing to remember is, if you've gotten to the interview point in the process, they're considering you. you are at the door. So don't, like I said, don't get hung up about your accent, but don't get hung up about some of the challenges or deficiencies. Be prepared to talk about them and say, I took a year when I was coming to the US. It took me a while to settle in and learn English, but now I am ready. Now I am excited. I've done these clinical rotations and I feel very comfortable in the US medical system, and I'm ready for this residency. So be self aware, just like weaknesses, just like deficiencies on your records or gaps in your resume. You need to be comfortable addressing them, but don't let that hold you back. Um, they might ask what personal characteristic you find annoying, or what are you looking for in a supervisor. They could ask something about what's an ideal supervisor. Have you ever had an experience when you and your supervisor disagreed? They may ask more clinical questions about cases, so be prepared for those. I always work with people and want them to be prepared with a story about a case that they were involved with where they met a medical challenge. So that's something you also want to have on your be prepared about. So thinking about, once again, when I said think about times when you feel really good and proud of your work, times when you dealt with challenges, times when you dealt with difficult situations, with conflict, and how you handled it. There's a whole body of sort of behavioral questions. Tell me about a time when. Um, so if you get one of those, you want to think of an example. You want to think about the problem that you dealt with, what you did, the approach, and then the results. So that's what we call a power question. Um, so you can do some research on YouTube, on the internet about behavioral interviewing, but be prepared with some stories about dealing with challenges, dealing with conflict, times when you felt very proud. And hopefully, as I'm talking, the way that you're thinking about preparing for the interview is very related to the way you're preparing for the personal statement. Really grounding yourself in your own personal experience and your personal successes, which will help you move forward in this process. They may ask why this specialty. You certainly want to be prepared with an answer. For many of you may have experience in different specialties, but now are looking at primary care. So really understand why, not just to say, well, my chances of matching are better, but to be able to say, I really love internal medicine. I like to be the one who kind of is at the center and builds a relationship with the patient, and then has the opportunity to work collaboratively with other specialists. Um, be prepared to answer the question why this part of the country is appealing to you. And, you know, be clear. If you're, like I said, if you're going to upstate Minnesota, you're going to have some winter. So be prepared. They may also ask you about your hobbies and your interests, and about your support system, what you do to relax, how you take care of yourself. Hopefully, in that interests section on the CV, on the ARIS application, you talked about hobbies that engage you in learning and arts and athletics. Not all of that, but they want to know that you're a really well rounded person. So, after the interview, it is very important to send a thank you note, a letter, or a card within 24 hours after the interview. The follow-up should state your appreciation, explain your continued interest, emphasize points about the residency that were appealing, and restate how your background, skills, personality would be a good fit. Once again, this is not a long letter. Just, dear so and so, I really enjoyed meeting you and learning about the residency program at your hospital. I'm excited about being part of a program that really emphasizes serving the community. And I think my skills in medicine and patient contact would be a great fit. All right. Um, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen in a moment and see about questions. I want to remind you that, as I said, if you are located in the United States and meet our qualifications, we'd be very happy for you to join Upwardly Global. And if not, there's some great resources that you can access on our website.
Do you think these interview questions apply to interviews in any stage of the medical journey?
Yes, absolutely. So I think depending on where you are in the journey, I work with some doctors that uh, have been practicing for a while and so have medical practice, but I know many of you are just completing medical school, so you can reference rotations you did in medical school, things you did in courses. Absolutely. You want to bring your personal experience into the personal statement, into the interview.
Does the personal statement prep also apply to medical, or sorry,
Medical
personal
school.
statement as well? Or sorry,
Yes. Yes.
med
If
school,
you
yeah.
are joining us and applying to medical school, I think the personal statement, that advice um, is really important at any stage. As I mentioned, for folks going to college in the US, write personal statements, right, Juan? And so that absolutely, for a medical school application, for any, yeah, I think generally speaking, the challenge is to convey yourself. Somebody asked about how long it should be. It should ideally be about a page, and it should tell your story. So wherever you are in the process, if you're looking to go to medical school, that's what you emphasize. Yeah. So I answered how long. How important is English proficiency in a personal statement? Important, very important. So if you're struggling, I hope you can find someone in your community that can help you, can review it. It doesn't have to be fancy. I really think it's fairly easy to tell if someone hasn't actually written their own personal statement. There are services out there, but I would not recommend that. But I would say, to find someone, it doesn't have to be a doctor, doesn't have to be a medical professional. If your community, there's a high school English teacher who was your teacher and can sit with you, the personal statement does not, I am not a medical professional. I cannot train you to take the USMLEs, but I can review a personal statement. So that would be my approach to that. Great question. Should any potential red flags be addressed proactively in the application or wait until the interviews? Great question. I think if you can address a red flag in a concrete way, I when I arrived in the US, I was struggling with getting acclimated, and I took step one and I wasn't successful. But it helped me learn what I needed to know. And on the second approach, and the second time I was more successful. You can, or unless you have a way to really incorporate it in your story and make it a positive, I would probably hold off and wait until it comes up in an interview. But it's sort of a personal question, but I would say when you address 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 those challenges, you want to make sure you figure out how to make it into a positive or and a growth experience. What are extra medical activities during gap times which look like not wasting time? Great question, Nana. Um, uh, you know, we are pulled in many directions in our lives. We have to make money. We have to care for family members. I think what it's how you package that into a positive. I was had the opportunity to come to the US and work as a nanny and learn my English, get to know US culture, and that has strengthened my application. Or, I don't think it's a question so much of what are the activities, but how you talk about them in a way that adds value to your life and your story. So I think that's how I would approach that question. Don't raise red flags. High school was very, very difficult. So I spent a year living on the beach. Not really going to make a strong statement, but, um, I had the opportunity after high school to travel and spend time working and, getting ready for the next level. So it's much more how you package that conversation. Um, oh, Uh, Sai Arpita, good question. How do I substantiate being an older graduate? You are who you are. I think it's talking about how that time has been valuable, made you a, a better doctor. Hopefully, as an older grad, you have good clinical experience that you can draw upon. I think the real concern can be if you're an older grad and you haven't been working in medicine, then how do you talk about how that reflects? But I think you know, as a career coach, I believe that there are opportunities for everyone. And this residency application process is really devastating because there just aren't enough spaces, and that's a problem on us as Americans. Our system is not very good. Um, you all are doing all the best things you can do to make yourself competitive, to prepare to be part of this, and I'm in awe, and I wish you success. And at some point, that's where you're at. You bring your very best, most prepared self to this process, and you do your best. And hopefully they see there is a program out there that sees your incredible value.